Hey, we're in reInvent. You don't know if I'm live or an agent. You're watching Textron Gang. Hey everyone, red pill, blue pill, am I Agent Smith or Shimmy? That's the story here at reInvent. That's billions and billions of AI agents coming our way. This is a special edition Textron Gang. It's just me and Mike Vizard. We're gonna bring you up to date. Today's Wednesday. AWL reInvent really kicked off yesterday, so we did do a live sort of recap on that from yesterday. So if you want to go back on Textron TV or wherever you're watching this, YouTube or what have you, you can watch it there. But we're going to update what we found out yesterday and what we're hearing today. Mike, it certainly is a different reInvent.
This is true, and there's a lot of chatter in the hallways these days about this open letter that the AWS employees put together last week warning that the company wasn't paying enough attention to the economic and employment and climate impacts of AI. And folks are kind of, starting to ask some questions about, geez, well, what are we doing here? And it feels like, we're still in this go fast and break thing mentality, and maybe they and the rest of the world are starting to ask some more thoughtful questions about what does all this mean?
I got to give you my Shimmy take on this. What does it all mean? What they're really saying is, how many jobs is this going to cost? I happen to be speaking, everyone sooner or later comes to Boca Raton, Florida, to visit a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, a parent, or you get old yourself and you'll move there. So I was in Boca Raton last week, and the people renting the townhouse next door to mine, their son, lo and behold, works for AWS. Oh. He's speaking here. I'm not going to mention names. But he said that they have laid off, I think something in the area of 40,000, is it? Or 30,000?
Or at least they have plans to get to that number.
And that's only phase one.
Yeah.
Phase two is in like amount of, I think, 50 or 60,000 people. And so while I admire the gist of the letter that we're doing this for, guns, apple pie, and wrapping ourselves in the flag, there is a certain amount of
no doubt,
preservation here at work.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do we need regulation of AI? Yes. Do we expect AWS to self-regulate AI and it goes against their shareholders' best interest?
Oh.
No.
So where does this kind of play out at the end of the day? Let's imagine that we automate so many things now that we don't have enough people working to buy the things that we're making through automation, and we just create this kind of cycle where, we kind of have a zero-sum game.
It's the end of poverty, and like Elon says.
Well, so you think universal basic income is going to come?
It's Star Trek. What's the guy's name? Zefram Cochrane. I spoke about him on Shimmy Says.
Uh-huh.
But no, seriously, the issue is they're not wrong about the dangers of this, about the repercussions of this. Mm-hmm. But to expect a single company to stand up to do the right thing against its own maybe baser instincts or the better, the profits to its shareholders is it's a little naive. Now who's being naive?
Is there a demarcation between the interest of companies and the interest of society at this point?
Of course there is. That's capitalism.
That's becoming more pronounced than it's ever been because, the implications and the scale are much different.
Never say it's ever been, because the fact of the matter is it was never as bad as it was during the robber baron days, let's call them, right, of the J.P. Morgans and the Vanderbilts and so forth. However, I'll go back. I'm a political science student. Why do we have a government? Why do we have a social contract to form communities for the common good? We can't expect corporations to work for the common good any more than we can expect any individual to work for the common good. This is political theory 101, by the way, right? You can't expect individuals to always do what's right for the common good. This is why you have a government. This is why you have governments. This is why you have community. We need, whether it's truly the government or a community perhaps of corporations, of individuals and corporations that are working on behalf of the common good. It's unrealistic to think AWS should sacrifice profits or its competitiveness vis-a-vis the market for the common good.
So does somebody need to, is this going to become a plank in a political platform in the next election? And does this become...
Hey, vote for Shimmy.
I didn't know you were running.
Well, I'm waiting to get drafted.
Okay.
Nor will I accept the nomination. Someone said
You just
that
like to
once.
be asked.
Yeah, I just want to be asked. But no, seriously, I do think that whenever we stop futzing around with 80-year-old people running to be president of this country and we do pass the torch to a new generation, that this new generation is going to ask these questions. What do we have to do? Should we rein in big tech? How do we rein in big tech? How do we regulate AI while maximizing its benefit to society? That's not a question that an individual corporation should answer. It's a question we need to answer as a people.
All right. And that is exactly what we're talking about in the hallways of this conference these days. I don't think it's happening on the show floor. I don't think it's in the sessions because they're all about the tech. But, over a beer, people are going, hey, where are we going? Where are we taking everybody on this ride?
It's funny you bring that up. It reminds me, of course, next month we have our Predict 2026 event. And this, TechStrong's, it's almost not TechStrong's Person of the Year. TechStrong's Entity of the Year is AI. That's the theme. And the promo for it is actually two AIs having a beer or sharing a cocktail saying, isn't it great to be an AI right now? Right? I mean, we are the masters of the universe. And I think that is the conversation. Do we ask the AIs to do what's best for humanity and regulate themselves somehow or something? Is that that's a little... The guys will fish.
They might argue with each other forever and come up with different answers, just like Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah, you're right. But maybe they're immune from politics.
Maybe.
I'm just throwing it out there.
I think they would conclude it's the one that builds the most data centers for them is the right answer.
Because they have their self-interest.
There you have it.
So do AIs have their own self-interest? Wouldn't that take a level of consciousness that I don't know if they're...
Or I just have a voracious appetite for memory, so therefore I go from there.
I think you've crossed the line there.
I may have.
But in any event, I am... Much like security, I think regulation of AI is going to be a bolt-on, an after. First, we got to get it working and doing all the things it's doing. Then someone's going to say, well, let's rein in those horses, even though it may be too late.
I would give AWS props on 2 points. They did roll out some ability to implement guardrails into AI agents using code.
Us?
And they also have a tool now that analyzes the behavior of the AI agent to see if it's, acting in the appropriate manner to whatever mission it was given, which, you could think of and see how that might be expanded over time.
And kudos to them for doing it. I don't think that's about really regulating the AIs. I think it's just making the AIs more efficient, your agents more efficient. But Mike, I feel like we're biting at the edges here. Let's get to the meat.
Well, the other side of the thing that people are talking about here is the other companies that are here besides AWS are also doing significant things that make a difference. Red Hat's here talking about a partnership with AWS, where Red Hat is now taking their stack of OpenShift and all their other platforms and making it available on the AWS AI accelerators, not just the GPUs from NVIDIA. So that tells me that we're going to see the software stack needed to use these other processors, and that's going to lower the total cost of AI. And I think that's a big part of this conversation.
No, we are. I think, it's funny. This is, if not today, within the next day or two, is the 3-year anniversary of ChatGPT.
I think it was yesterday.
It was yesterday. Was the 3-year anniversary? I said within a day or two. Was the 3-year anniversary of the release of ChatGPT. Maybe we didn't know it that day, but shortly thereafter, I think we realized the game has changed. Here we are 3 years later, and we have all that. But Red Hat has certainly, but Red Hat's always been a bellwether AWS partner, I think. Right? And AWS has always been a good partner to Red Hat.
They're frenemies, right? Because Red Hat also talks about portability, and you need to make sure your workloads can run anywhere they want.
And that's a hybrid world, right? And a multi-cloud world, which for I think AWS acknowledges that there is such a thing as hybrid cloud and multi-cloud and everything else. But let me give some kudos to AWS. As much as this reInvent this year is about AI and AI agents, they are really playing up their partners. This partner ecosystem is now 140,000 partners strong worldwide. That's incredible. Incredible. Let me say that again. 140,000 partners in the AWS ecosystem. And they're not all the Red Hats of the world or the SUSEs of the world who we're going to be talking with later, or actually we spoke about yesterday. We spoke with them, and we'll be talking again with them today, who have a whole bunch of AI-themed partnerships with AWS that they've announced here. It's the jobbers, the people who are converting the SMBs, migrating them to the cloud, modernizing the stacks, transforming their businesses by putting them into AWS. It's those people. It's the small, medium, and large software developers and ISVs, independent software vendors. It's an amazing look, Microsoft's always given credit for having an amazing channel. Google's tried to build an amazing channel.
The partners are having the same issues they had with Microsoft, right? And it's the nature of the beast, and you don't know what AWS is going to do 6 months to a year from now. And so if you're a partner with them, you're always kind of like, well, today we're selling together, but a year from now, they may have something that does what we do, and then it'll be more of a complicated relationship, and there'll be this, I think Ray Norda coined the phrase co-opetition, but the ecosystem, has some inherent
conflict. Well, let me call a spade here. There has been a sort of frog and scorpion type of relationship between AWS and partners over the years, in that if AWS sees what the partner's doing is that successful, they don't often buy the partner. They're not one of those companies that does a lot of acquisitions. They just kind of suck the brains out and build it themselves.
They create they take an open source project and make it a service, right?
Absolutely. So there is that. But I will tell you, as TechStrong, speaking on behalf of TechStrong, for the last 3 or 4 years, we've been working with the AWS partner team, and they highlight certain partners that we do webinars with and we do our mini portals with to highlight their great content and their services that they bring to market. And it's a deep well of real expertise.
So on a positive side, they put out a study this week talking about, and it's not exhaustive, right? I think they talked through an in-depth interview of so-called 35 partners, and these are not the tech vendors, but more of the service providers. But they did note that depending on the level of add-on services that you deliver, you can make anywhere from $1.25 to like $7 and change for every dollar that AWS generates.
Yes.
And they're just trying to highlight that the ecosystem, can make more money than AWS does if you take full advantage of it. Now, getting to that $7 mark requires a significant amount of investment in expertise. And so not everybody gets there, but there is room for companies to live in this ecosystem.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, I would just, there's the Red Hats, the SUSEs of the world, the F5s of the world. In other words, there's the big vendor partners, let's call them strategic partners, who do a significant amount of business with AWS. Then there's, I call them service integrators.
Yeah, SIs.
Right? Who are helping people do the modernization transformation. They're doing the lifting. And they work on a much different margin basis, right? So the $7 for every dollar spent on AWS that's phenomenal business for those guys, right?
Yeah.
They used to working on basis points, basically. And so that's great. But there's also this, like everything else, there's this middle class of, they're not red hats, quite red hats, but let's call them ISVs, people who are building software that kind of make AWS easier to use, that allow you to do some advanced things that maybe AWS does sort of mimic at some point down the road if it becomes too successful.
Yeah, well, if you're going to live in the shadow of something, you got to realize that maybe that thing is alive and it's going to roll over one day.
But you know what? Yes, you're 100. That was a good way of putting it, Mike. But AWS isn't an ogre here. This is something that this has been done this way forever.
I don't think they're malicious about it. I think that they look at it and they say, we've seen enough requests from customers for a certain capability. And there may be some smaller company that saw that same opportunity and moved a little bit faster, but...
Well, they innovated.
Yeah, but once it reaches a certain threshold, you're almost guaranteed that AWS is going to fill that what they perceive as a vacuum that you just happen to be in, and that's when all the air gets sucked out of that particular vacuum.
I think the difference, though, Mike, is... You look at IBM. IBM was notorious, right?
Yeah.
This kind of stuff.
Microsoft has the same rep.
Microsoft, too. But they both bought a lot. Well, not as much Microsoft, but IBM, they buy you.
Yeah.
Right? They bought you. If you had some good technology, they didn't look to reinvent the wheel. They just buy you. Microsoft made their share of it. Cisco, another company. So many people who were in Cisco, went out of Cisco, started a company and got bought back into Cisco.
I think AWS has more of a tendency to try to engineer it themselves first. And then,
it's a made here mentality.
I'm hard pressed to think of, major acquisitions that they've done. And a lot of
their model.
And a lot of it also comes back to, frankly, the way that the platform is built around this Nitro virtualization thing that they have is they need deep hooks into that. And so it's difficult. If I got to buy something, they're going to have to re-engineer it anyway.
Yeah.
So they might as well just write it.
Agreed. If you don't mind, I'd like to turn to security.
Sure.
So there's been some security announcements. There's a security agent, one of the big three agents that AWS is pushing. I don't know if I had to classify, would you call it an AppSec agent or more of a...
It's kind of I call it a DevSec ops agent, right? Because it's really aimed at a developer to sit alongside.
Right, that's what I meant by AppSec. It's on the left side of the event horizon.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
But, when I first got into cloud security, when cloud first came out, I was already into security. And we got into cloud security. Cloud security was much more about operational security, right? My app is up and running. Mm-hmm. Does it have buffer overflows?
It was part of the SecOps conversation.
Yeah, it was SecOps. Let's call it that. You don't hear as much SecOps chatter here as you do call it AppSec chatter.
Well, Yeah, I think that's the nature of this particular market. But I'll point you to some stuff that Sumo Logic was talking about this week.
Okay.
They're building, they're essentially revamping their approach to AI. They're still calling it Dojo, but they are rebuilding it around an MCP server. And what they're saying is that you will have agents for IT ops and agents for SecOps that will share access to the same MCP server, and they will collaborate across each other, and those functions will increasingly be blended. And they're also saying that you can also bring your own third-party agent to that MCP server because they have access to this telemetry data, and that's what all these agents need. So as you start to think about SecOps, does it just eventually just become part of the IT function motion, and these agents are all handling that process? And then there's what we call security today, is the whole policy-driven part of security, where we set up the frameworks and the guardrails. That still is classic security, but the SecOps part of it seems to be melding more and more into the IT ops function.
I think that's a fair way of looking at it. Here's my question on that, though. We're about a year into this MCP thing. It's become this thing. It was December of last year.
Yeah.
And it's December of this year. That's a year in my book. So how many MCP servers do I need? How many MCP servers do I want?
You could have many, or you could have a few really large ones. They're kind of like Kubernetes clusters in my mind. The thing about MCP, though, is it's still early days. I mean, they update MCP every quarter, and what it looks like today doesn't look anything like it looked a year ago.
Well, but, yes and no. What it is and what it does and how it does this become the standard. Mm-hmm. It's just, do I want to use Sumo's MCP server to marry SecOps and Ops? Do I want to use Salesforce's MCP server, ServiceNow's MCP server, Amazon's MCP server? At one level, I'd like a world where I had one MCP server that allows all my agents to talk to each other.
Then does that provider of that MCP server become the dominant soul or entity in all of IT? Because essentially now you're looking to one company to provide the management framework that sits on top of all that MCP servers, and everybody else is plugging in an AI agent into that and becoming a satellite of that company. Or will it kind of continue as we currently have it, where there are, maybe 10 large ecosystems that are IT operations frameworks, whether it's ServiceNow or IBM. They all have MCP servers, and other companies are kind of providing agents that sit around that. But I don't see how you make money just providing an agent, so that becomes an interesting challenge. So I feel like there's going to be some sort of convergence here of all these functions and companies as certain things become agents and other things become, the core orchestration layer sitting on top of an MCP server accessing telemetry data. And that's going to be where the split is. But I don't think we're going to recognize this IT landscape as we see it today. And 2 years from now, it won't look anything like it has for the last 10.
Yep. I have 2 words for you, young man. Open source.
Open source.
I think what we need here is an open source MCP server that becomes the de facto standard open MCP server that everyone could use. And then, much like Service Mesh on top of Kubernetes, people build things on top of that open source MCP server. So you only really have the one MCP server, and perhaps you have sort of plugins or meshes that sit on top for different functionalities that you're referring to.
It's hard to see how the MCP server provides any differentiated value right now from what...
That's what I'm saying, and that screams open source to me.
And then the battle then comes around the orchestration framework that sits above it, and that's where this thing will be won and lost.
I agree. I think we're in agreement. All right, so let's move on from that.
Let's write this day down.
Yeah. A day that'll live in infamy. No, that's next week. Or later this week. Anyway, So yes, I do think security and AI security, of course, like everything else, AI sucks it up. Now, I wanted to talk about good old-fashioned SecOps. We wound up talking about AI security. What else are you seeing out here, Mike?
I think that is still the vibe. You know, what's amazing to me is just the sheer number of people who are here. And when you go over to the show floor and you're walking around the Venetian, it's like I don't know what the total number is, but I'm going to say, 25, 30,000 of my closest friends and associates are all walking around over there.
Well, no, I heard the number was closer to 60.
I don't know. If it's 60, I think that might be bigger than the Venetian can handle, which is why they're maybe in all these different...
No, but they're all, it's not just at the Venetian. They are all over the place. Interesting, good stuff, though. I think, we still have 2 more days of coverage, basically, today and tomorrow. And we'll see what comes out of it.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be, what's that Chinese phrase about living in interesting times?
How did that become Chinese? I thought it was Irish.
No, I thought that was Chinese. I don't think the Irish made that one, but
I was always told it was an Irishman.
I was always told it was essentially a Chinese curse.
Okay. Okay. And the Chinese probably tell people it was a Jewish thing.
Well, that could be too. And maybe we're all just stealing each other's proverbs.
And that does go around. But you know what else is interesting, though? So AWS came out yesterday with this flurry of announcements, right? And for the PR folks out here, here's a lesson. Don't put your announcement out day one of AWS reInvent because it gets drowned out by the reInvent.
Well, I guess you get apparently maybe 6 hours of lead time because AWS starts putting out its announcements on right around dinner time of the night before the official conference.
Right.
They have their pre-show press conference, and then they have a regular press conference, and they go from there.
But I think day 2 and 3 is a great day to put out news. I'm just saying, throwing it out there for you.
Well, I'll tell you the truth of the matter is by the time I get to all the AWS stuff, it'll be day 2 or 3 before I get to the third parties.
There's that many. There are a ton. There's a ton of announcements. I'll tell you something else, though. For those of you watching this live, you're probably not here. And you're asking yourself, should I have gone to reInvent? Should I go to next year's reInvent? What gets lost in the sauce of all of these big announcements is the literally hundreds of sessions. No matter what you're into, no matter where you're looking to expand and learn or dive deeper, there's a session here at reInvent where you could go in and hear someone talking about it, where you can meet like-minded people in the audience that are into that particular aspect of this thing. And it's a great place for networking, for learning. There are AWS education training classes. I think that happened the weekend before reInvent.
Hey, there's some comfort to be taken in the fact that, if you're a little anxious about AI, well, you can walk around with everybody else who is equally anxious and doesn't know exactly what's going to happen either, but
there is
at least it feels better.
And just another enticement to come to reInvent. It's a heck of a lot cooler here than it is in August for Black Hat. So I'll give them that. But Mike, I know you got to get busy back out on the floor. We're going to be here continuing our live coverage, so stay tuned for that. But you've just watched another episode of Tech Strong Gang.